My husband, he was murdered." The woman's piercing scream shattered the peaceful afternoon, shaking the entire city of Suzhou. A woman collapsed beside her husband's body, sobbing uncontrollably. Police arrived just minutes later, but it was already too late. The killer had vanished without a trace. The case was quickly ruled out as a robbery or burglary. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, just a family lunch, once filled with laughter, now turned into a bloody crime scene. And then, just a few hours later, the killer suddenly walked into the police station and confessed everything. But what chilled the investigators wasn't the murder itself. It was his reason. Why would someone who called the victim cousin kill him without hesitation? And why did the woman sobbing beside her husband's body look so innocent while standing in the middle of all the guilt? This wasn't just a murder. It was a case of lust and moral decay within a family. Hold on to your heart, because what you're about to hear is all true. Subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. Afternoon of November 4th, 2015. Suzhou police received an emergency call. A woman's panicked voice said, "My husband was stabbed." The address was traced to a restaurant in the center of Luji town. Realizing the seriousness of the case, police forces were immediately dispatched. Upon arrival, they had to push through a crowd gathered around the restaurant. Inside, a man lay motionless on the cold tiled floor, eyes wide open, his left hand still clutching his chest where the weapon had struck. Police quickly sealed the scene and called an ambulance. But it was too late. The victim had died from massive blood loss before medics arrived. The man was Dong Cheng, 45 years old, owner of the restaurant. Huang Fang, the victim's wife, cried uncontrollably beside the corpse. Her sobs filled the entire restaurant with suffocating grief. After calming Huang Fang, police immediately began investigating the crime scene. Dong Cheng's body showed no signs of struggle, no bruises, no overturned furniture. Locals confirmed they heard no arguing or fighting. No one noticed anything strange until the wife screamed. From all collected evidence, one conclusion became clear. Dong Cheng wasn't expecting the attack. The killer was definitely someone he knew. Searching the second floor, police found the storage cabinet tampered with. The drawer was pulled out, the lock half broken. Inside, completely empty. Wang Fang confirmed. The cabinet previously held cash, some jewelry, and the couple's savings book. It was now almost certain, after the murder, the killer went upstairs, took all valuables, then fled. Could this really be a robbery? But who robs a family member right after killing them in their own home? When asked who was present during lunch, Huang Fang said there were 4 people: herself, a close friend, her husband Dong Cheng, and her husband's cousin, Dong Mou Wu. After lunch, Huang Fang and her friend went shopping. Only the 2 men remained at the restaurant. Not long after, she received a call from Dong Mou Wu. "Dong Cheng and I have to return to our hometown urgently." Before she could ask more, he hung up. Worried, Huang Fang rushed back, only to find her husband lifeless on the floor, and Dong Mou Wu missing without a trace. Her friend confirmed they were together all afternoon, never returning to the restaurant. At the time of the murder, only Dong Cheng and Dong Mou Wu were inside. Police matched her story with the call and immediately noticed the inconsistency. The urgent hometown trip was vague and suspicious. The fact that Dong Wu disappeared right after the incident made things worse. No one could reach him. No one knew where he went. Investigators now leaned heavily toward one theory. Dong Mou Wu was the prime suspect, and he was on the run. The plan moved fast. One team pulled CCTV footage along all exit routes. Another set up roadblocks at every exit from Luji town. But before they could finish, something unexpected froze the entire station. Dong Mou Wu, the prime suspect, walked into the police station himself. He bowed his head. No resistance, no excuses, just one sentence: "I killed him." The confession seemed simple, until detectives dug deeper and uncovered the real wound, one festering for nearly a decade. This wasn't a spontaneous act of rage. It was the final explosion of long-buried hatred, masked for years under the word family. According to Dong Mou Wu, he and Dong Cheng were cousins who grew up together in Anhui. They had always been very close since childhood. After dropping out of school early, Dong Mou Wu followed his cousin to work on construction sites, back when Dong Cheng was just a small-time contractor. At that time, Dongcheng treated him very well. He never delayed salaries and even gave up heavy tasks whenever Mou Wu complained. Their relationship was like real brothers. But over time, the favoritism faded. Whenever Mou Wu complained, Dongcheng just said, "Tough it out." What infuriated Mou Wu wasn't the words, but the feeling of being pushed aside, treated like an outsider. The final straw was about money. Dongcheng once promised to only take a 10% cut, but when payday came, he took 30%. He said one thing but did another, Mou Wu told investigators. The cousin he once admired now seemed like a hypocrite. After that incident, Mou Wu quit the job and refused to work with him again. For years afterward, he didn't contact or check in with his cousin's family. In the interrogation room, Mou Wu didn't cry or avoid eye contact. He looked straight at the investigators and recounted everything, clearly and calmly, as if he'd replayed the story hundreds of times in his head. "Back then, I was just a kid fresh out of school. I thought he'd lift me up. But in the end, he taught me my first lesson in betrayal." At this point, the police started to wonder, could old resentment alone lead to such a brutal murder? Or was there something more to this story? Mou Wu chose silence. Investigators shifted their focus to Huang Fan, the grieving wife, but something in her demeanor didn't quite match sorrow. She completely denied the claim that her husband cheated anyone of money, insisting all wages were fair and without dispute. But what caught the officer's attention was her reaction when asked about Mou Wu. She avoided eye contact and changed the subject. It was anything but innocent. After hours of pressure, Huang Fang finally collapsed on the table. Her tears weren't just from grief, they were from guilt she could no longer hide. She confessed everything, and suddenly, Mou Wu's story became much more coherent. According to Huang Fang, the marriage was arranged. She was 10 years younger. After marriage, Dongcheng was always away at construction sites, while she stayed home cooking, cleaning for him and his workers. A dull, suffocating life, growing more unbearable each day. Dongcheng was short-tempered and volatile. Every time he had a bad day outside, he came home to take it out on her. At first it was verbal, then yelling. Then his hands stopped holding back. Huang Fan endured both emotional and physical abuse. But everything changed the day Dongcheng lost control and hit her in front of the workers. Mou Wu stood nearby. He hesitated for a moment, then jumped in to stop it. That was when all boundaries began to blur. That night, Mou Wu sent her a message. "Are you okay?" A simple text, but to a woman who'd lived in cold silence for years, it felt like warmth. From there, harmless texts turned into a secret thread, connecting two lonely souls. A wife drowning in fear, a cousin burdened with resentment. Their feelings grew, though they hadn't crossed the line yet. Everything changed one rainy night. Dongcheng came home drunk and furious. His rage turned toward Huang Fang. This time, it wasn't just words. He shoved her hard against the stove. She'd had enough. She fled, straight into Mou Wu's room. And in that moment, two broken hearts clung to each other. They crossed the line with a night of forbidden passion. From that day on, they were no longer cousin-in-law and sister-in-law. Whenever Dongcheng left home, Mou Wu silently entered her room. The affair continued, hidden in the darkest corner of the house, but that kind of relationship was bound to collapse. When Mou Wu started dating someone new, Huang Fang changed. She became cold whenever his girlfriend visited. After the girl left, she'd sneak into his room, demand attention, and ask, "Who's better, me or her?" That question became a trap neither could escape. Meanwhile, tensions between Mou Wu and Dongcheng exploded again, this time over unpaid wages. Unable to endure the betrayal and injustice, Mou Wu quit the construction crew and gradually cut all ties with Huang Fang. After the project ended, Dongcheng and Huang Fang moved to Suzhou to start a new life. However, Huang Fang revealed that after moving, Dongcheng became increasingly depraved, frequently spending money on nightlife and squandering all their savings. During the investigation, she also discovered in her husband's pocket some medication for a sensitive illness, raising another layer of suspicion. When confronted, Dongcheng finally admitted to having an affair with a prostitute and contracting a sexually transmitted disease. Huang Fan was shocked. Fortunately, she had not been intimate with him since. At that time, in her despair, Huang Fang decided to beg Dong Mou Wu to return. Dong Mou Wu didn't hesitate and agreed to move to Suzhou. He helped out at the restaurant during the day and slept on the couch at night. In fact, Huang Fang later admitted that she had been begging Dong Mou Wu to return ever since he left, not just after discovering the affair. He only agreed to come back after learning about Dong Cheng's infidelity. And so began an ironic scene: the husband and his wife's lover living under the same roof. However, the relationship between the three was never balanced. Dong Cheng's illness had progressed, making it impossible for him to be intimate with his wife. Meanwhile, Dong Mou Wu, driven by long-suppressed desire, would quietly slip into Huang Fang's room each night as if it were a forbidden ritual. These nights didn't last long. Then tragedy struck. On November 4th, 2015, exactly 1 month after Dong Mou Wu moved in. That noon, Huang Fang and her friend went out for lunch, leaving only the two men in the restaurant. After eating, Dong Mou Wu was washing dishes when Dong Cheng suddenly insulted him, each word like a knife, calling him a dropout, a parasite, even a woman. After ranting, Dong Cheng leaned back in a chair to rest, but behind him stood a man boiling with rage. Feeling belittled, discarded, and robbed of love, Dong Mou Wu quietly walked into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and ended it all. With blood still on his hands, Dong Mou Wu called Huang Fang. His voice was disturbingly calm. "Dong Cheng and I have to go back to our hometown." He hung up, went upstairs, emptied the safe, taking all the cash, jewelry, and savings book, and walked out through the back door. After a day and night on the run, he saw his face on the news and local alerts. Knowing he couldn't escape, he turned himself in. On November 22, 2015, Suzhou Intermediate People's Court held a public trial for the shocking case. Dong Mou Wu was charged with 3 crimes: robbery, intentional injury, and murder. Given the seriousness of the crime, he should have faced the death penalty. But due to his confession and cooperation, the sentence was reduced to life imprisonment with lifelong deprivation of political rights. Dong Cheng, the seemingly harsh but vocal husband, was in fact the root of the collapse. His violence wasn't just physical, but also emotional, turning his wife into a voiceless, invisible shadow. Every day beside him chipped away at Huang Fang's soul. When endurance wore thin, Huang Fang began to fight back. Not with words, but with her heart. And that heart sought solace in the one person who should have upheld moral boundaries: Dong Mou Wu. But the outsider quickly lost neutrality. Dong Mou Wu entered the affair not out of love, but out of a desperate need for validation. He wasn't entirely innocent. He could have stepped away, kept his distance, but he chose indulgence. From witnessing injustice to indulging in lust, then spiraling into jealousy and emotional dependency, it all exploded when he was publicly humiliated by the man he once looked up to. Dong Cheng's death wasn't random. It was the last drop in a glass long overflowing. But the issue was, after the murder, Dong Mou Wu didn't stop. He calmly went upstairs, stole valuables, misled Huang Fang, and fled. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated, calculated, and criminally clear. Everyone in this story paid their own price. Dong Cheng, the abuser, died by the hand of family. Dong Mou Wu, the man hiding behind loyalty, received life imprisonment. Huang Fang, the abused yet complicit wife, lives on in loneliness, shame, and a haunted past. If the law had intervened earlier in the domestic violence, could this tragedy have been avoided? If Dong Mou Wu had kept his sanity? If Huang Fang had chosen another path, would the ending still be a blood-stained floor? This wasn't just a crime. It's a brutal reminder that some evils, if left unchecked, bloom into disaster. The law can punish actions, but it cannot save decayed hearts. In a chaotic world, what keeps people from falling into darkness isn't love or rage, but ethics and reason. This video ends here. If you found the story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so we can bring you more strange, emotional, and gripping stories. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next episode.
A small diary, filled with the scrawled handwriting of an 11-year-old girl, became irrefutable evidence in a shocking incest case. Dad says we're like a married couple. Sister Katie now has to be called stepmother. The story didn't stop at mere words. In her diary, the girl suggested that the child Katie, her sister, was carrying was fathered by Stephen himself. The baby is the child of Dad Stephen and Sister Katie. a demon and a human. Will it have half demon blood? These lines unveiled a horrifying reality, a truth Elisa, Katie's biological mother, never considered when she left Stephen in an attempt to protect her children. This story not only shocked the United States, but also sounded an alarm about hidden dangers within families shrouded in secrecy and manipulation. Don't take your eyes off the screen. This case will reveal jaw-dropping details you've never heard before. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to uncover the full story with us. Case setting: San Andreo, Virginia, USA. In 1995, our protagonist, Stephen Label, was a 20-year-old young man renowned for his good looks and confidence. He began using the internet to explore romantic relationships. In a lively chat room, Stephen met Elisa, a 15-year-old shy yet dreamy girl. The impulsiveness of youth quickly drew them closer. Despite their age difference, Stephen and Elisa dove headfirst into a passionate online romance. They exchanged hours of messages, sharing dreams and the ambitions of their youthful spirits. 2 years later, at the age of 17, Elisa discovered she was pregnant. Against family opposition, she and Stephen decided to get married. In January 1998, Elisa gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, whom they named Dennis. They hoped the arrival of a child would elevate their relationship to a new level, but reality proved otherwise. Stephen soon revealed his darker side. He was not only cold, but also exhibited disturbing violent tendencies. Elisa frequently witnessed Stephen yelling at their daughter and neglecting her care. Matters reached a horrifying climax when Elisa discovered Stephen physically abusing Denise, choking her and even locking her in a refrigerator when she cried. Elisa, with a heavy heart, decided to place her daughter Dennis for adoption with a family in New York, believing they would provide love and protection. Dennis was just 8 months old at the time. After Dennis left, Stephen grew distant and accused Elisa of destroying their family. Their marriage began to crumble, teetering on the brink of collapse. Meanwhile, Dennis, now renamed Katie, grew up in a loving adoptive family that cherished her unconditionally. Her adoptive parents not only cared for her, but also nurtured Katie's artistic talents, providing her with a fulfilling childhood. As Katie grew older, however, an emptiness lingered. She often wondered about her origins and the biological parents she had never met. On her 18th birthday, Katie's adoptive parents revealed the truth about her adoption, hoping to provide her with clarity about her roots. Filled with a yearning to reconnect with her biological family, Katie began her search. Her adoptive parents supported her by reaching out to Stephen and Elisa. Stephen and Elisa were shocked and emotional upon receiving the message from Katie's adoptive parents. The thought of reuniting with their daughter after 17 years apart brought them to tears. They quickly agreed to meet Katie and invited her to live with them in Virginia. In August 2016, Katie left her adoptive family to live with Stephen, Elisa, and her 2 younger siblings in Virginia. Katie's adoptive parents felt uneasy but respected her decision after trying to persuade her to reconsider. Initially, the reunion was heartwarming. Stephen and Elisa welcomed Katie with open arms, and her siblings quickly bonded with their long-lost sister. However, Elisa soon noticed unsettling changes in Stephen's behavior. The man who had once been lazy and messy now took meticulous care of his appearance. Stephen began shaving regularly, dressing neatly, and spending an inordinate amount of time with Katie. Elisa became increasingly anxious as she noticed Stephen's gaze toward Katie wasn't that of a father's love, but something disturbingly inappropriate. Whenever Katie laughed or spoke, Stephen's expression was one of infatuation, leaving Elisa deeply unsettled. Elisa confronted Stephen, questioning his behavior. He dismissed her concerns angrily, saying, "I just want to be close to my daughter. There's nothing wrong with that." Despite Elisa's growing alarm, Stephen seemed indifferent to her feelings. One night, Elisa entered Katie's room and found Stephen sleeping on the floor beside her bed. The sight left Elisa stunned. When confronted, Stephen coldly responded, "What's wrong with sleeping in my daughter's room? You're overreacting." Realizing she needed to act, Elisa took the opportunity to speak privately with Katie. She revealed Stephen's history of abusive behavior when Katie was a baby, hoping this would distance her from him. However, Katie's response shocked Elisa. She dismissed the past and seemed to welcome Stephen's attention in the present. Katie showed no concern for Stephen's past actions, accepting his affection without question. In November 2016, after months of enduring the situation, Elisa filed for divorce from Stephen. She moved to another city with her 2 younger daughters, but was unable to convince Katie to join them. Initially relieved after the divorce, Elisa remained haunted by fears for Katie's well-being and her relationship with Stephen. Elisa attempted to contact Katie but received no response. She felt helpless, unsure of how to protect her daughter from the bizarre bond she shared with Stephen. In May 2017, while cleaning the house, Elisa stumbled upon the diary of her 11-year-old daughter. What she read left her in disbelief. The diary described, "Dad says he and Katie are soulmates. He says Katie is my stepmother. Dad is like a demon." Accompanying sketches depicted Stephen as a monstrous figure with glowing red eyes and clawed hands. Elisa was horrified to realize that Katie was pregnant with Stephen's child. She couldn't comprehend how this situation had escalated. The crude scribbles in the diary felt like an accusation against Stephen and the twisted relationship between him and Katie. It was a revelation that shattered Elisa's heart. Unable to accept this grim reality, Elisa called Stephen immediately. When confronted, he didn't deny the accusations. Stephen coldly replied, "I thought you already knew. We're in love." Elisa felt her world collapse. She screamed in agony, "She's your daughter. Our daughter." Stephen hung up without a word. Left with no choice, Elisa reported Stephen to the police, providing evidence including Katie's diary and peculiar messages she had sent. The police launched an investigation, interviewing Elisa's 2 younger daughters in search of additional evidence. However, the investigation yielded no concrete results. Katie refused to cooperate, and Stephen denied all accusations, cleverly painting Elisa as a jealous ex-wife seeking revenge. With insufficient evidence to arrest Stephen, the police were forced to halt the investigation. Meanwhile, Stephen and Katie's relationship became increasingly public. Neighbors began whispering, many expressing disgust at the peculiar dynamic between the father and daughter. Stephen even boasted to friends that Katie was carrying the child of their love. In July 2017, Stephen and Katie decided to solidify their special relationship by getting married. However, marriage between father and daughter is illegal in the United States. Calculating as ever, Stephen devised a plan to take Katie to a distant state where no one knew them to execute their scheme. The pair falsified documents and provided false information to register for marriage. On July 20th, 2017, they officially became a legally married couple on paper in Maryland. The wedding took place in a small room, attended by a select few guests who left outsiders unsettled: Stephen's mother and Katie's adoptive parents. Photos from the wedding shocked the public when released. Instead of opposing the union, their family members smiled and celebrated the illicit relationship. Particularly striking was Katie's adoptive father, who always insisted his daughter had the right to choose, grinning broadly next to his pregnant adoptive daughter carrying her biological father's child. Frankly, this situation leaves many of us baffled. When asked why they supported the relationship, Stephen's mother replied calmly, "Stephen and Katie are adults. They know what they're doing." These irrational justifications sparked further public outrage. In September 2017, Katie gave birth to a baby boy named Bennett. This event further amplified the scandal surrounding Stephen and Katie's forbidden relationship. The birth of the child, expected to quiet the controversy, instead drew the attention of Maryland authorities. On September 1, 2017, Maryland authorities launched an investigation into the legality of Stephen and Katie's marriage. Through DNA testing, they confirmed that Stephen was Katie's biological father and that Bennett was the result of their illegal relationship. Under mounting legal pressure, Stephen tried to justify his actions, declaring that his love for Katie was unstoppable. Manipulated by Stephen, Katie also defended her father, insisting that she had willingly entered into the relationship. However, this did little to mask the truth about the immorality and illegality of their union. In January 2018, just 4 months after their wedding, both Stephen and Katie were arrested. The arrests came after reports of their incestuous relationship and the existence of their child Bennett surfaced. According to laws in most U.S. states, Incest is a criminal offense punishable by a minimum of 10 years in prison, and in some cases, life imprisonment. With clear evidence in hand, Stephen and Katie were promptly charged. However, the trial took a dramatic turn as Stephen's lawyer presented arguments attempting to reduce the severity of the charges. The defense argued that the relationship was consensual and that both parties were adults capable of making their own decisions. This argument, though absurd, made the trial a contentious debate. Some speculated that Stephen's lawyer was exceptionally skilled, while others suspected corruption. Ultimately, Stephen was released on bail, and Katie received similar leniency. This decision, while questionable, stood as the final ruling in this phase of the case. Although released, Stephen was prohibited by court order from leaving Virginia and from contacting Katie in any form. However, the judge allowed him to visit his son, Bennett. This decision was controversial, as Bennett's grandmother was tasked with caring for the child during Stephen's legal supervision. Meanwhile, Katie, upon being released, decided to leave Virginia and return to live with her adoptive parents in New York. During this separation, Katie began reflecting on the events that had unfolded. She realized that her relationship with Stephen was wrong and that she had been manipulated by him for years. Overwhelmed by guilt and shame, Katie decided to cut all ties with her biological father. She called Stephen to clearly state that their relationship was over and that she wanted to start a new life without him. This rejection pushed Stephen into a state of despair. Feeling betrayed, he spiraled into negativity, which set the stage for his subsequent horrific actions. On April 11, 2018, Stephen appeared at his mother's house with a calm demeanor. He claimed he wanted to take Bennett to New York to see Katie, citing a desire to reunite the family. His mother, unsuspecting, handed Bennett over to Stephen. Instead of heading to New York, Stephen drove directly to his isolated home, where his sinister plan began to unfold. In the dimly lit and secluded house, Stephen's mental instability became increasingly evident. Believing he had lost everything, he decided to end all suffering. Stephen coldly took Bennett's life. The child, on his 8-month birthday, faced a tragic fate mirroring the traumas his mother, Katie, had endured in her childhood. The baby was strangled to death, and his body was placed in a refrigerator, a chilling reflection of Stephen's fractured and deranged mind. Stephen then wrote a haunting suicide note, left on the table, blaming Katie for everything. The note implied his actions were a final message directed at her. After this, Stephen drove over 1,000 kilometers to Katie's home in New York, fueled by hatred and a desire for revenge. Before arriving, Stephen called Katie, convincing her that he only wanted to return Bennett and meet her one last time. Katie, unaware of his true intentions, agreed to meet him at a nearby location. Early the next morning, Stephen arrived at the meeting spot, parking his car nearby. He watched Katie's home, observing her every move. When Katie and her adoptive father stepped out of the house, Stephen quietly followed them, maintaining enough distance to avoid detection while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As soon as Katie's car stopped at the agreed location, Stephen rushed toward them like a storm. Exiting his vehicle, he drew a gun and opened fire on both Katie and her adoptive father. The quiet morning was shattered by screams as Katie fell, her eyes wide with shock and pain. Her adoptive father had no time to react before being struck by the targeted bullets. A passerby witnessed the horrifying scene and immediately called the police. Stephen, after the attack, stood frozen, staring at the lifeless bodies of those he once claimed to love. Rage and despair burned in his eyes as he contemplated his actions. When police arrived at the scene, they found Stephen's car abandoned 8 kilometers away, but Stephen was nowhere to be found. Authorities quickly expanded their search area, identifying Stephen as the primary suspect in the murders. After a day of relentless searching, Stephen's body was discovered in a forest near Donor, New York. He had taken his own life with a gunshot to the head, leaving behind a short note declaring he had nothing left to lose. The letter further outraged law enforcement and the public, highlighting Stephen's selfishness and brutality. The case ended in tragedy and heartbreak. Katie, her adoptive father, and Bennett all lost their lives. Stephen, the architect of this nightmare, chose suicide, leaving a trail of pain and unanswered questions. Stephen's actions led to widespread condemnation of the legal system's failure to prevent such a catastrophe despite early warning signs. What do you think? To me, this case raises baffling questions about the roles of Stephen's biological and Katie's adoptive parents. Did they truly understand the consequences of their decisions? This concludes the video. Thank you for watching this gripping story. If you found it intriguing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to catch our upcoming content.
In 2006, in Hunan, China, a 26-year-long family tragedy involving unimaginable crimes came to light. It revolved around an unethical and disturbing relationship between a mother and her son. Beneath the guise of a normal family lay years of mental torment, where the son was forced to fulfill his mother's twisted desires. Gradually, the endurance turned into hatred, leading to a tragic end. The mother was murdered, dismembered, and her body discarded in a river. This case is full of shocking and captivating details. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to explore this story with us right now. The case unfolded in Yongzhou City, Hunan Province, where the Xiao River flows through. It was May 25, 2006. Around 6 a.m., an elderly man named Ding was fishing by the riverbank. Suddenly, his fishing rod bent as if he had caught a big fish, and he pulled hard. When he reeled it in, it wasn't a fish, but something large. Upon closer inspection, he was horrified to find it was a human body, specifically a headless, bloated corpse. Terrified, Ding immediately called the police. Investigators quickly arrived at the scene, cordoned off the area, and began a forensic examination. The body was identified as a middle-aged woman, approximately 70 years old, wearing a purple floral nightgown with severe injuries on her body. The autopsy revealed that the victim was strangled to death before being dismembered. The wounds indicated she resisted fiercely before dying. Time of death was determined to be May 15th. Additionally, short hair samples and semen were found on the victim's body, suggesting she had engaged in sexual activity before her death. More horrifyingly, the victim's head and hands had been deliberately removed to conceal her identity. Police collected blood and hair samples at the scene for DNA analysis. Meanwhile, another team began reviewing missing persons reports from Yongzhou City and surrounding areas. Public alerts were broadcast on TV, radio, and local newspapers, urging people to provide any information related to the case. However, no useful information emerged at first. The incident sparked widespread fear in the community. Schools and workplaces were heavily affected, with many people afraid to leave their homes without companions. This small city was suddenly shrouded in darkness, and people could only hope the police would soon catch the culprit. Despite days of investigation, the police found themselves at a dead end. The victim's identity and the perpetrator remained a mystery. Public anxiety mounted, placing immense pressure on law enforcement. At this point, an unexpected breakthrough occurred when a man named Zhang Dai, living in Yongzhou, voluntarily came to the police station to provide information. Zhang Dai, a scrap collector with a disheveled appearance but a serious demeanor, caught the attention of investigators. Zhang Dai reported that his lover, Chen Min, a 70-year-old woman living in Yongzhou, had suddenly gone missing. He suspected the body might be hers. Zhang and Chen Min had been lovers for nearly 3 years. They often met at her house but kept their relationship secret. Zhang stated that on the night of May 16th, as usual, he went to Chen Min's house. He rang the doorbell several times, but no one answered. Thinking she wasn't home, he left. However, after several days of trying to contact her without success, he became worried. When news of the case spread and he recognized the nightgown, he reported it to the police. The police recorded his statement and decided to investigate this lead. They went to Chen Min's house, but the door was locked and no one was home. Neighbors confirmed they hadn't seen her for about 2 weeks. During verification, the police learned that Chen Min had been divorced for many years and had only one son, Lu Yingji, aged 46. The police summoned him to assist in identifying the victim's body. In his initial statement, Lu Yingji claimed that his relationship with his mother was very good. However, due to his busy work schedule, he had not visited her often and had not been in contact with her for about 10 days. Initially, the police suspected the body was Chen Min's, so they obtained a court order to collect DNA samples from Lu Yingji. The results confirmed their suspicion to be entirely accurate. The victim was indeed Chen Min, aged 70. At this point, investigators noticed something strange. News about the headless body in the Xiao River had spread everywhere. So how could a son not know his mother was missing? Why hadn't he checked on her for 10 days? Examining Lu Yingji's hands, investigators found multiple scratches and bruises. When questioned, he claimed they were the result of heavy lifting work. However, this explanation was not entirely convincing, as those in heavy labor usually wear gloves, which would not leave such scratches. Investigators questioned whether he was hiding something and whether the injuries on his hands were actually signs of a struggle. The ambiguity in his explanation caused the police to focus on Lu Yingji. They planned a thorough investigation into his statements, including his work schedule and personal relationships. Lu Yingji led a tumultuous life. He was unemployed and only worked as a part-time loader for a delivery company. His background was complicated, with 2 failed marriages, and he was currently living with his 3rd wife and children. A new detail emerged. A neighbor recalled hearing loud arguments from Chen Min's house about 2 weeks prior, but couldn't remember the exact date. This increased suspicion of Lu Yingji, as he was the closest person to her during that time. With accumulating clues, investigators believed they were closing in on the truth of the case. One detail particularly caught investigators' attention. Lu Yingji stated that Chen Min had a landline phone, but upon searching her house, police found no such phone. Checking the phone records registered to Chen Min's home, police discovered a call made from her number to Lu Yingji's on May 15, 2006. This discovery completely contradicted Lu Yingji's earlier claim that he hadn't contacted his mother for over 10 days. When questioned again about this contradiction, Lu Yingji appeared flustered and provided an unconvincing explanation that his mother had canceled her phone service a month earlier. Police recognized this as a clear sign that Lu Yingji was hiding something. Investigators decided to use forensic results as leverage to further their investigation into him. Semen samples found on the victim's body at the scene were sent for DNA testing. Simultaneously, police obtained a warrant for an urgent search of Lu Yingji's home to find additional evidence to verify his statements. The DNA test results shocked investigators. The semen matched Lu Yingji's DNA perfectly. This revelation stunned the entire investigation team. Previously, they had not compared the semen sample's DNA as they had not considered the possibility of such a sick relationship between mother and son. This discovery made Lu Yingji the prime suspect. Police immediately issued an emergency arrest warrant for Lu Yingji. When authorities arrived, he refused to cooperate, locking himself inside his house and barricading himself. Inside the house, Lu Yingji screamed and threatened to commit suicide if the police approached. The situation escalated as he threatened to set the house on fire if forced to comply. Although the police hadn't formally accused him yet, his actions were nearly equivalent to a confession. The special task force quickly implemented negotiation strategies while preparing a tactical team to act if the situation got out of control. After more than 2 hours of tense negotiations, when Lu Yingji let his guard down, the special team stormed in and successfully subdued him. He was handcuffed and taken to the police station in a state of mental distress. Faced with irrefutable evidence, particularly the DNA results, Lu Yingji gradually lost his composure and appeared visibly shaken. After hours of psychological confrontation at the investigation office, Lu Yingji finally confessed to all his crimes. However, the story he recounted left investigators in utter disbelief. According to Lu Yingji's statement, his parents had once deeply loved each other, defying strong opposition from both families. They married and moved to Yangzhou, where he was born. But their happiness didn't last. Just a year after Lu Yingji was born, his father had an affair, leading to his parents' divorce. His mother, Chen Min, raised him alone, filled with anger and resentment towards life. The real tragedy began on Lu Yingji's 18th birthday. During a small party with just the two of them, they drank alcohol together. In a drunken state, Chen Min crossed the boundary between mother and son, leading to an unethical and immoral relationship. From then on, Lu Yingji was trapped in a vortex of guilt. He admitted that for the next 26 years, Chen Min was always the one to initiate the sick relationship. Her control extended beyond their personal relationship, affecting his life. Every time Liu Yingji tried to build a new romantic relationship, Chen Min sabotaged it. When he had a girlfriend, she often pressured or directly threatened him to break up. Both his marriages failed for this reason. Chen Min did not hesitate to use the sick relationship to control him. She demanded that Liu Yingji visit her once a week to maintain their relationship, threatening to expose the horrifying truth to his wife and family if he refused. Unable to escape his mother's grip, Liu Yingji turned to alcohol and gambling to numb his mental pain. However, these habits only drove him deeper into despair and a sense of helplessness. On May 15, 2006, a minor event triggered a major tragedy. Liu Yingji withheld a small portion of his wages from his wife, causing her to suspect he was having an affair. After a heated argument with his wife, Liu Yingji left the house in anger. In his frustration, he returned to his mother's house at midnight. There, the two once again engaged in the forbidden relationship. Afterward, Chen Min demanded that he leave his wife and return to live with her. When Liu Yingji refused, she threatened to expose their sick relationship to his wife and family. These threats were the final straw. In a fit of rage fueled by years of resentment and oppression, Liu Yingji strangled his mother. Chen Min resisted fiercely, but was unable to overpower her son. Within a few short minutes, she succumbed in her own home. After killing his mother, Liu Yingji panicked. To conceal the victim's identity, he decided to use a knife to sever her head and 2 fingers, hoping this would prevent the police from identifying the body. He placed the dismembered body in a large plastic bag, then drove to the Xiao River to dispose of it. He threw the parts into the river, hoping everything would disappear in the deep water. Recounting the story, Liu Yingji could not hide his pain and regret. He admitted that his motive for killing his mother stemmed not only from resentment over physical abuse but also from fear that the horrifying truth would be revealed, destroying his family. Investigators were stunned by Liu Yingji's confession. They realized this was not just an ordinary murder case but a horrifying family tragedy where the lines between love, control, and crime had been completely blurred. Liu Yingji's story shocked not only the investigators, but also the public later on. The illicit relationship spanning 26 years between mother and son caused mental destruction and led to a tragic and gruesome ending. At the investigation office, Liu Yingji admitted to all his crimes but expressed deep regret when asked about his feelings. However, in his answers he still appeared not entirely remorseful, claiming his actions were an inevitable result of family tragedies. The initial trial at the Yangzhou City People's Court lasted 3 days. The case drew significant public attention due to its horrifying details and the incestuous relationship lasting 26 years, something unimaginable to many. The court found that Liu Yingji's actions constituted murder with a particularly cruel and barbaric nature. While the defendant had a special family background and suffered psychological trauma from a young age, these factors could not justify the act of killing his mother. The court concluded that this case exemplified the severe degradation of social morals. This tragedy not only harmed the defendant's family, but also served as a wake-up call about distorted human values caused by psychological instability and poor education. Based on the investigation, questioning, and arguments at trial, the court sentenced Liu Yingji to death for murder. He was also ordered to compensate the victim's family for funeral expenses. After sentencing, the court allowed Liu Yingji 15 minutes for a final statement. He wept bitterly, knelt before the court, apologized to his deceased mother, and expressed deep remorse to his wife, children, and family. Despite expressing regret, Liu Yingji decided to appeal, hoping the appellate court would reduce his sentence. He claimed that he had endured immense pressure and suffering, leading to his uncontrollable actions. At the appellate trial, the Supreme People's Court upheld the death sentence from the initial trial. However, considering the defendant's previous good character, his sincere confession, and signs of remorse, the court suspended the execution for 24 months. The court emphasized that the suspension of the death penalty was the defendant's final opportunity to atone. If he showed positive behavior and repentance during this time, the death sentence might be commuted to life imprisonment. However, this possibility was slim. In prison, Liu Yingji began to show signs of change. He participated in labor and educational activities and wrote apology letters to his wife's family, seeking forgiveness. Nevertheless, the shadow of his crimes loomed over his life. After 2 years, the final decision on Liu Yingji's fate was made. Due to his positive behavior in prison, his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. However, to society, he remains a symbol of family tragedy and moral decay. The case of Liu Yingji serves as a stark warning about the dangers of unresolved psychological trauma. It also raises questions about the responsibility of family members in allowing prolonged control and abuse. This video ends here. Thank you for following this gripping story. If you found this video fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss more captivating stories.